I'll give you my month's salary if you can translate this." The millionaire CEO, Pierce Hawthorne, chuckled, looking down at the cleaner. He didn't know he was betting against the wrong person. "Get out of the way. Important people are trying to pass," Pierce shouted at Alara Vance, shoving her cleaning cart with such force that it nearly toppled over. It was a brisk Tuesday in March, and he was especially on edge because he'd lost a multi-million-dollar contract the week before to a rival firm in New York. Alara, dressed in the simple blue uniform of the contracted cleaning service, just lowered her head and mumbled, "Excuse me, sir," as she retreated into the corner of the polished Chicago office hallway. Pierce, a sharp-featured man of 42, ran one of the largest luxury import firms in the Midwest. He wore custom Italian suits that cost more than many of his employees' annual wages and carried the entitled air of someone who'd never broken a sweat for anything in his life. To him, people like Alara were nothing more than inconvenient obstacles in his path. "Chloe," he bellowed at his secretary as he stormed into the sleek Place office, "how many times do I have to tell these cleaning people not to clutter the entryway when I'm arriving?" Chloe, 35, had worked for him for 8 years and was intimately familiar with his explosive temper. "Mr. Hawthorne, she was just doing her job. The floors need to be done before the morning rush." "Job? Standing dead center in the main hallway is a job now?" he retorted, slamming his leather briefcase onto his mahogany desk. "These people have no sense of hierarchy. They think they can occupy space as if they own the place." Alara, who was 43 and had been working there for 2 years, heard every word from the hallway. She was accustomed to this kind of treatment, virtually invisible to most of the employees. But she heard everything, observed everything, and quietly cataloged every small, cutting humiliation. The day proceeded normally until the mail arrived, bringing a document that would change everything. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing an international airmail stamp and addressed directly to Pierce. He tore it open. Upon seeing the contents, his expression shifted from arrogant annoyance to utter confusion. The papers were filled with strange characters and impossible-to-pronounce words, a language he'd never encountered. "What the devil is this?" he muttered, flicking through the pages with a look of distaste. "Looks like something from another planet." Chloe nervously approached as he started to raise his voice again. "Chloe, come here and deal with this mess. Someone sent me papers in some alien dialect." She took the documents and carefully examined them. "Mr. Hawthorne, it looks like Czech, or maybe another Slavic language. There are official seals, and the company name is listed here." "Czech!" Pierce roared, letting out a loud, mocking laugh. "Who speaks Czech in Chicago? This must be some international scam." But when Chloe pointed out the numbers that looked like large sums in euros and today's date, the seriousness of the situation started to sink in. "Fine, get a translator. There must be dozens in this city who can handle this quickly." The panic began immediately. Chloe called every major translation service in Chicago, but none had a specialized translator available for such an uncommon language as Czech on short notice. As the hours ticked by, Pierce grew visibly frantic. "What do you mean nobody is available?" he exploded, slamming his fist onto the marble table in the conference room. "I'll pay whatever it takes. This city has 3 million people, and not one person knows how to translate a few cursed documents?" The news of the strange, untranslatable papers and Pierce's meltdown spread like wildfire through the executive floor. Employees started gathering, drawn by the commotion, trying to help with online translation apps. But the dense, archaic legal terminology rendered every attempt useless. It was Beth from finance who brought the terrifying realization to light. "Mr. Hawthorne, official documents like this usually have a response deadline. If you ignore it, you could forfeit legal rights or face massive fines." Pierce scanned the papers again, his eyes catching a date clearly marked. Today, 6 p.m. EST. It was already past 3 p.m., and he started to sweat, the realization hitting him that he might be losing a massive financial opportunity. "This is ridiculous," he yelled, addressing the cluster of employees. "A company my size can't solve a simple translation problem?" That's when his arrogance completely took over, twisting his frustration into a cruel joke. In the peak of his frenzy, Pierce decided to turn the crisis into a dramatic public spectacle. He held the thick documents high above his head and shouted for the entire office to hear, "Listen up, everyone! I'll give my entire month's salary, $45,000, to anyone who can translate this gibberish." He laughed loudly, as if it were the funniest thing in the world. $45,000 USD was a massive sum, more than the annual income for most of the junior staff. No one took him seriously. "For that price, I'd learn any language in 5 minutes," shouted Trevor from sales, making everyone else laugh even louder. The situation had devolved into collective dark comedy, with employees cracking jokes about invented languages and extraterrestrial translators. Pierce adored being the center of attention, especially when he could flaunt his financial superiority. But in the midst of the chaos, one person observed everything in absolute silence. Ilara Vance was in the hallway, organizing her cart, paying attention to every single word. For 2 years, she had been treated as invisible, overheard countless condescending comments, and been dismissed as if she weren't even a person. As she got close enough to clearly see the papers Pierce was waving like trash, her eyes widened. It wasn't the shock of the language, it was the content she understood perfectly. These papers were not spam or a commercial letter. They were official international probate documents regarding a $15 million euro inheritance left by a distant relative. Ilara swallowed hard. The documents explained that Pierce had been located as the sole living heir of a deceased Uncle Joseph in Prague, Czech Republic, but the clock was ticking. The deadline was 6 p.m. that same day to confirm receipt and initiate the legal process. She glanced at her watch. 3:30 p.m. There was still time, but not much. And here was Pierce mocking the very documents that could fundamentally change his life, offering his monthly salary to solve a problem that she could resolve in 10 minutes. Ilara felt a surge of indignation and opportunity. 2 years of being humiliated, treated as unintelligent, and completely ignored. Now was her chance to prove that appearances are completely deceiving. "Excuse me, Mr. Hawthorne," Ilara said, her voice firm yet respectful, cutting through the diminishing laughter. "I might be able to help with the translation." The entire office fell into an instant, stunned silence. Everyone turned to stare at the cleaner who had dared to interrupt the CEO's cruel fun. Pierce Hawthorne stopped laughing and simply glared at her, his face a mask of utter incredulity. "You what?" he asked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "I said, I can translate the documents for you, sir," Ilara repeated, maintaining her steady posture. "I know the language." The outburst of laughter that followed was even louder than before. Employees doubled over, wiping tears from their eyes, convinced it was the most absurd joke they'd ever heard. The cleaning lady offering to solve a problem that professional, high-end translation agencies couldn't touch? Pierce laughed so hard he had to steady himself by gripping the edge of his massive desk. "Did you hear that, folks? The cleaning lady is a polyglot. Well, that's just perfect, honey. So, you're going to make me 15 million euros by translating some check papers?" He didn't know he was right about both the language and the value, but Ilara did, and she was ready to accept the challenge he had thrown down, unaware of who he was dealing with. "Look, sweetie," Pierce continued, still chuckling, "the woman who can barely keep the corridor clean wants to solve a problem that even professional translators couldn't touch." The employees laughed harder, some even applauding the show he was putting on. But Ilara did not flinch. She knew exactly what she was doing. The deadline was rapidly approaching,
and within a few hours, this mockery would transform into the most expensive lesson Pierce Hawthorne had ever learned in his life.
Mr. Hawthorne, I am not joking, Alara said, taking a step closer, even as the office continued to titter. I genuinely can translate these documents. Pierce wiped the laughter from his eyes and looked at her as if she were a talking animal. Oh, of course you can, and I can fly. Listen here, sweetheart. Go back to your broom and leave the serious problems to the adults. The collective laughter echoed through the office once more. Even Chloe, the secretary, felt a pang of pity, but she too thought it was impossible for a cleaner to solve what experts could not. Ilara didn't move. She held her ground, her eyes fixed on the crucial documents in Pierce's hand. May I at least see the papers, sir? Perhaps I can identify a few words. Identify a few words? Trevor from sales shouted through his laughter. Ma'am, this isn't a child's game. These are complex legal documents. Yes, stop insisting, Beth from finance added. You're only going to make things worse. But Ilara persisted. There was a quiet determination in her posture that didn't fit the image everyone had of a simple cleaner. Mr. Hawthorne, you yourself offered your salary to anyone who could translate it. I am here offering to try. Pierce stopped laughing for a few seconds. Something in her voice bothered him, a confidence that shouldn't exist. All right, he sneered. Since you insist on embarrassing yourself, I'll give you the chance. But when you fail, I want you to apologize to everyone here for wasting our time. He thrust the documents at her with a disdainful gesture. Go on, genius. Show us how it's done. Ilara took the papers carefully, as if handling something immensely valuable. The moment her eyes scanned the text, her entire expression transformed. It was as if a part of her that had been dormant for years had suddenly awakened.
K výhradnímu dědici. Vážený pane Pierce Hawthorne.
The words, spoken with perfect pronunciation and a natural fluency that flowed from Ilara's mouth as if she had been born speaking Czech, hung in the air. The office was in a state of absolute silence. It was impossible to fake that kind of linguistic command. Pierce Hawthorne's eyes were wide. His jaw literally dropped. Are you actually reading that? He whispered, his booming voice reduced to a barely audible croak. Yes, sir, Ilara replied, her eyes still fixed on the documents. It says, Dear Mr. Pierce Hawthorne, we are writing to inform you of the legal situation regarding the inheritance left by your paternal uncle, Josef Svoboda, who passed away in Prague on February 15th of this year. Pierce's shock intensified. He had an uncle in the Czech Republic? He had no idea. But far more stunning was hearing this woman he despised, speaking with perfect clarity, a language he didn't even know existed. Continue, he managed, his voice barely a breath. Ilara continued reading, translating with a seamless flow that left everyone in the room dumbstruck. Your uncle Josef left an estate valued at 15 million euros, including multiple properties in the old town of Prague and a considerable bank account. As the sole living heir of the Svoboda family, you are legally entitled to all assets. 15 million euros. The number echoed through the silent office like thunder. It was enough money to expand his company tenfold, enough to secure the futures of 3 generations of Hawthornes. Pierce gripped the edge of his desk to keep from falling over. But there is a condition, Ilara continued, turning the page. You must officially confirm the receipt of this correspondence by 6 p.m. EST today and submit the signed confirmation documents by midnight tonight. Failure to meet this deadline will result in the entire estate being transferred to the Czech government. Pierce looked frantically at the clock. It was 3:50 p.m., less than 4 hours to confirm, and only 8 hours to send everything back. Complete panic began to consume him.
How do you know Czech? He stammered, still struggling to process the monumental reversal of fortune. Alara carefully folded the documents and handed them back to him. I was a professor of linguistics at a major university in Boston, Mr. Hawthorne, a specialist in Eastern European languages. I worked there for 15 years. The office fell silent again, but this time it was a silence of profound shock. This woman, who they saw every day cleaning toilets and emptying trash cans, had been a university professor. "You were a professor?" Chloe asked, genuinely curious. "What happened?" Alara sighed deeply. She hated talking about the past, but she knew she needed to explain herself to be taken seriously now. "I lost my job 2 years ago. I reported a corruption scheme at the university where certain administrators were selling fake diplomas and forging grades. I was subsequently fired for causing institutional instability and became a pariah." "And after that?" Beth asked. Her expression completely changed now. "I was effectively blacklisted from the academic world. No university wanted to hire someone who had reported corruption. My husband was unemployed. My daughter, Iris, needed constant medical care. I took the first job that offered full benefits and a steady paycheck." Ilara's story dropped like a bomb in the middle of the office. Employees who were laughing at her just minutes ago now looked at her with a mixture of dawning respect and profound pity. It was impossible to reconcile the silent, invisible cleaner with the image of a respected, highly educated professor. "Are you certain about the translation?" Pierce asked, still clinging to a sliver of disbelief. "I am, sir. I can translate the entire document word for word if you wish. I can also help draft the necessary reply that needs to be submitted." Pierce started pacing, his brain running at 1,000 miles an hour. 15 million euros, a fortune that was literally in the hands of the woman he had just humiliated minutes earlier. Every new disclosure from Alara was like a fresh blow to Pierce Hawthorne's massive ego. The woman he treated like dirt had a professional background that he could only dream of possessing. Yet, his ingrained arrogance still had one last gasp. "Even so, I could be paying you to invent anything," he said, folding his arms dismissively. "How do I know you're not lying about the value or the urgency?" This was the moment Alara did something entirely unexpected. She pulled out her simple, dated cell phone and quickly dialed a number she clearly knew by heart. "Hello, Czech Consulate. This is Ilara Vance, former official translator. Could you confirm the authenticity of some legal documents for me?" She spoke in rapid, fluent Czech for a few minutes, relaying the header information of the documents, and then hung up. "Confirmed," she stated, her expression unwavering. "The documents are authentic. They were sent by the law firm of Kuvar and Associates in Prague. The inheritance is real." The silence in the office was deafening. Pierce felt as if the floor was dissolving beneath his feet. Not only was the inheritance real, but the woman he despised was the only person capable of securing it for him. "What do you want to complete the full translation and legal response?" he asked, his voice noticeably quieter than normal. "You already made an offer, Mr. Hawthorne," Ilara responded, looking him directly in the eye. "Your monthly salary, $45,000. Pierce swallowed hard. It was a staggering amount, but compared to 15 million euros, it was a negligible fee. "Fine, I accept, but everything must be ready and submitted by 6 p.m. "It will be," Ilara said with quiet confidence. "But I will require a computer, access to the internet, and a guarantee that no one will interrupt me." "Chloe, clear out the executive conference room for her," Pierce ordered, still slightly dazed, "and get her whatever she needs, immediately." As Ilara walked toward the conference room, the employees began to whisper. It was impossible to fully process what had just happened. The invisible cleaner had revealed herself to be a highly qualified legal scholar, and now she was about to save the company's CEO from a spectacular loss. "I can't believe she really knows Czech, Ravan," Trevor murmured to Beth. "Dude, she just called the consulate right in front of us. You can't fake that kind of access or fluency." Pierce stood in the middle of the office, struggling to comprehend how he had so utterly underestimated someone. For 2 years, a former university professor had been cleaning his office, and he had never noticed. Worse, he had treated her as inferior, as if she were unintelligent. "Well, at least we found out she's not a typical cleaner," he muttered to Chloe, his arrogance still trying to cling to life. "But I still find this whole story strange." Inside the executive conference room, Ilara sat down at the computer and began to work. For the first time in 2 years, she felt truly useful again. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, translating not just the words, but capturing all the legal nuances a typical translator would miss. As she worked, she thought about the humiliation she had endured. Now, ironically, she was the one saving the man who had most looked down on her. The clock read 4:15 p.m. There was still time, but she knew her work had to be flawless, not just for the money, but to prove her own competence and self-worth.
At 4:45 p.m., Ilara finally emerged from the conference room, carrying a neat stack of papers and an expression that Pierce Hawthorne couldn't quite decipher. The entire office paused to watch as she approached his desk, walking with a self-assured posture that no longer matched the cleaner image they had all held of her. "It's ready, Mr. Hawthorne," she said, placing the organized documents on his desk. Full translation with all legal terms explained, and the required confirmation letter drafted in Czech. Pierce picked up the documents with trembling hands. The translation was impeccable, with every paragraph detailed and explained. It wasn't merely a literal translation. It was a professional legal document that included explanatory notes about the Czech probate process. "Here is everything about the inheritance." Ilara pointed to specific sections. "Your Uncle Joseph owned 3 major properties in Prague, including a historic hotel in the city center. He had no children, and you were located via genealogical records as the sole living heir." Pierce read every line, his eyes wide. The fortune was even larger than he had imagined. Beyond the 15 million euros in the bank, there were properties valued at least another 10 million euros. "And this confirmation letter?" he asked, pointing to a document drafted in perfect Czech calligraphy. "It's the official confirmation of receipt and acceptance of the inheritance. It needs to be sent via express courier today. I also prepared a power of attorney for the Prague attorneys to begin the transfer process." Chloe leaned in to examine the documents. "Ilara, this is incredible. It looks like the work of a major international law firm." "It is," Ilara responded simply. "I've handled hundreds of similar documents when I worked at the consulate." Pierce looked at her with an entirely new expression. It was no longer scorn or condescension. It was a mixture of forced respect and deep discomfort at having to admit he was wrong. "You really understand all of this?" he asked, the statement sounding more like a question. "Yes, sir. Besides Czech, I speak German, French, Italian, and Russian. I hold a master's in legal translation and worked on international succession cases for 8 years before going into academia." Each sentence from Ilara was a painful slap to Pierce's arrogance. Yet, he still tried to cling to one last doubt. "Still, I could be paying you to invent anything. How do I know you're not lying about the value?" That's when Ilara shared a deeply personal truth. "I took this job because I needed a job with health benefits, Mr. Hawthorne. My daughter, Iris, has type 1 diabetes and needs imported insulin and constant medical care. We lost our insurance when I was blacklisted." A pang of guilt struck Pierce's chest. For 2 years, he had been abusive toward a woman fighting to keep her child alive. "That's why you accepted a cleaner's job?"
he asked, avoiding direct eye contact. I had no option. I needed the employment contract to secure a health plan. When the cleaning company offered the position, I accepted immediately. It wasn't my dream job, but it was dignified.
Ilara, I need to go to the courier service right now, Pierce said, standing up abruptly. But first, I want to say something. All the employees who were still gathered around paused. Pierce rarely made speeches, and when he did, they were usually to criticize someone. I have treated you poorly for the last 2 years, he began, clearly struggling to articulate the words. I didn't know your story, but that doesn't excuse it. No one deserves to be treated the way I've treated you. Ilara looked at him with a neutral expression. Thank you for acknowledging that, Mr. Hawthorne. No, let me finish, he insisted. You just saved me from losing the biggest opportunity of my life, an opportunity I almost threw away because of sheer arrogance. The office remained absolutely silent. No one had ever seen Pierce apologize to anyone, much less a cleaning service employee. You will receive the $45,000 I promised, but beyond that, I want to offer you a real job. Consultant for international translation for this company. A salary of $10,000 a month plus full benefits. The offer caught Ilara entirely by surprise. She had expected to collect the money and return to her routine, but she hadn't anticipated an employment offer. I don't know what to say, she replied honestly. Think about it calmly, Pierce said, grabbing the documents, but know that it would be an honor to have someone with your qualifications officially working for the firm. As he rushed out to the courier, the office was left in a strange atmosphere. Employees who minutes ago viewed Ilara as a cleaner now saw her as a respected professional. Ilara, Trevor from sales approached her, I want to apologize. I laughed at you today, and that was completely wrong. Me too, Beth from finance added. I'd never imagined you had been through all that. One by one, employees came forward to apologize. Ilara accepted the apologies politely, but it was clear the attention made her uncomfortable. You don't need to apologize. It was just an unusual situation. But we do, Chloe insisted. We worked alongside you for 2 years and never bothered to really get to know you. Ilara smiled for the first time that day. Thank you. That means a lot to me. At 6:20 p.m., Pierce returned from the courier service, sweating and slightly out of breath, but visibly relieved. I made it. Documents sent with a delivery deadline, guaranteed for tomorrow morning in Prague. He approached Ilara, who was still in the conference room talking with a few employees. So, what do you think of the offer? Mr. Hawthorne, it is a generous offer, but I need to think about it. It's not a simple decision. Of course, I understand, but I hope you accept. Having someone with your experience would be invaluable for our international ventures. Ilara nodded. I will speak with my husband and give you an answer tomorrow. Perfect, Pierce smiled. And Ilara, yes? Thank you. Not just for the translation, but for teaching me a lesson I desperately needed to learn. Ilara gathered her purse and headed for the door. Until tomorrow, everyone. When she left, the office fell silent again. Everyone was processing the day's events. A woman they saw as invisible had revealed herself to be the most competent person in the room. Man, Trevor muttered, we worked for 2 years with a former university professor and never knew it. Imagine how many other people we misjudge every day. Beth reflected. Pierce learned that competence isn't about the job title. Pierce sat down in his chair, still processing everything. 15 million euros were on their way, but more importantly, he had learned a painful truth about himself. For 2 years, he had mistreated an extraordinary woman. And ironically, she had saved him when he needed it most.
Ilara was sitting in the reception area at 8:30 a.m. when Piers Hawthorne arrived half an hour earlier than usual. He was anxious to know her decision, but also nervous about working alongside someone he had treated so poorly. "Good morning, Ilara," he said, approaching the reception desk. "Have you decided?" "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne. Yes, I accept your offer, but I have a few conditions." "Of course. Name them." "First, I want to work half-time for the first 2 weeks to train my replacement in cleaning. I don't want to leave the contracted company short-handed." Pierce was impressed. Even after all she'd endured, she showed loyalty and integrity to the job she was leaving. "Second," she continued, "I want my salary to be deposited directly into the clinic's account where my daughter Iris receives her treatment. I want no risk of any missed payments." "No problem," he agreed immediately. "And finally, I want a written contract with all the job functions clearly defined. I don't want anyone in the future to question my qualifications for the role." "Fair enough," Pierce said, nodding. "I'll have legal prepare everything today." They ascended to the executive floor, where Chloe was already organizing the day's schedule. When she saw Ilara, she smiled and stood up to greet her. "Ilara, I'm so glad you accepted. It will be wonderful to work with you officially." "Thank you, Chloe. I'm excited too." Pierce was heading into his office when he turned back to Ilara. "Oh, I almost forgot to mention. An email arrived from Prague this morning. The lawyers confirmed receipt of the documents. They said it was the most impeccable translation work they had ever seen." Ilara smiled. "I'm happy they approved." "They didn't just approve. They want to hire you for other cases. It seems you have a reputation there I wasn't aware of." "It's possible. I worked with Kovar and Associates a few times when I was at the consulate." Just as Ilara was being formally introduced to the other departments, the day took a sharp, stressful turn. "Mr. Hawthorne," Chloe called over the intercom. "There's a Mr. Pavel Kovar on the line. He says he's the attorney from Prague and that it's urgent." Pierce immediately took the call. The conversation was mostly in English, but he had to ask Ilara to translate some of the more complex legal jargon. After 20 minutes, he hung up with a look of deep concern. "Ilara, we have a problem," he said. More documents arrived from Prague. It seems the inheritance has more complications than we anticipated. "What kind of complications?" "I didn't quite understand it. He said something about a legal contestation. Other relatives have suddenly appeared, pending lawsuits. He needs me to send the detailed response by tonight." "That's odd. Yesterday's documents explicitly stated you were the sole living heir." "Yes, but now it seems there are other people involved. And the worst part is, if we don't resolve this by midnight, I could lose everything." Pierce was clearly distraught. One day he was a millionaire, the next he might lose it all due to legal complications he couldn't even read. "Calm down," Ilara said, her voice firm. "Let's wait for the documents to arrive and analyze them carefully. My experience tells me these situations usually have a solution." At 2 p.m., a courier arrived with a thick envelope from the Czech consulate. It contained at least 20 pages of legal documents, all in dense, complex Czech. Ilara locked herself in the conference room to analyze everything. Pierce anxiously paced outside, asking every 15 minutes if she was finished. At 4 p.m., Ilara finally emerged, her expression serious. Pierce rushed to her side. "So, what's happening?" "Sit down, Pierce. This is more complicated than we thought. 3 people have appeared alleging to be relatives of your Uncle Joseph." "Tomorrow? That's impossible, Ilara. I don't speak Czech. I know nothing about the country, and I certainly don't know their legal system," Pierce exclaimed, running a frantic hand through his hair. "That's why you won't go alone," Ilara said calmly. "I'm going with you. I know the Czech legal system, I speak the language perfectly, and I have contacts in Prague. Without professional help, you will certainly lose everything. Pierce sat down, trying to process the monumental decision. But that will cost a fortune. Flights, hotels, lawyers. Pierce, you are talking about 15 million euros, Ilara countered, her tone sharp. Spending $20,000 to secure that is an investment, not an expense. And if I still lose everything? Then at least you'll know you tried everything. If you don't go, you will lose with absolute certainty. Chloe stepped in. Pierce, Ilara is right. You have to go. I'll take care of everything here at the firm. Pierce looked at Ilara again. You would really do that? Travel to Prague to help me? I would, but obviously not for free. I want 5% of whatever you recover. Pierce quickly calculated. 5% of 15 million euros was approximately $800,000 USD, a life-changing sum for Ilara and her family. That is exactly what any international lawyer would charge for a case like this, probably more. Pierce thought for a few seconds. $800,000 was a massive sum, but compared to forfeiting 15 million euros, it was a bargain. Fine, he said, extending his hand. I accept.
Ilara shook his hand firmly. Then let's prepare. I need to call my contacts in Prague. You need to arrange for an emergency passport, and we need to book flights for tomorrow night. The office immediately transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Chloe ran to the travel agency, Trevor helped with the passport documents, Beth organized Pierce's schedule, and Ilara made the essential calls to Prague. I managed it, she told Pierce after an hour on the phone. My former colleague, Andrzej, will meet us at the airport. He is a lawyer specializing in international probate. He's one of the best in the Czech Republic and owes me a few favors. That's a huge relief, Pierce sighed. It is. But Pierce, I need you to understand one thing. Over there, you will be just another foreigner trying to claim an inheritance. I will be your only bridge to their legal system. So please, do not treat me as you did here. Pierce flushed. Ilara, I won't, I promise. You don't need to explain. You just need to respect me. If you humiliate me in front of the Czechs, they will take their side and you can forget any chance of winning. Understood. I promise it won't happen. As they worked side by side, Pierce observed Ilara with growing admiration. She was completely in command, solving problems he didn't even know existed, and speaking with international attorneys as if they were old friends. Ilara, She stopped organizing the papers and looked at him. Because, Pierce, I am not you. I don't treat people poorly just because I can. The answer hit him like a punch to the gut. Besides, she continued, the money will change my family's life. Iris can get treatment abroad, my husband can return to school, and I can restart my career. You deserve this and so much more, Pierce said sincerely. Thank you. Now let's get back to work. We have a flight to catch tomorrow night. The flight to Prague, with a layover in Frankfurt, was long and tense. Pierce was visibly nervous, checking his phone and repeatedly asking Ilara if she was sure everything would be fine. Ilara, in contrast, was calm and focused, reviewing Czech legal statutes on her tablet. When they arrived in Prague, Andrzej Kovar, a distinguished man in a dark, impeccable suit, was waiting. Ilara, it's good to see you. You look wonderful, he said in a heavily accented English, embracing her warmly.
Andrzej, thank you for meeting us. This is Pierce Hawthorne, my client. Andrzej shook Pierce's hand firmly. Mr. Hawthorne, I read the documents Ilara sent me. A complex situation, but not impossible. In the car to the hotel, Andrzej explained the scenario. 3 people contested the inheritance. 2 cousins claimed Joseph promised them the properties. The woman claimed she was his common-law wife for 10 years. It sounds like everyone in Prague knew my uncle except me, Pierce muttered. Normal in international probate. Relatives appear like mushrooms after the rain when money is involved. They checked into their hotel rooms. Pierce, get some rest. Ilara suggested. Tomorrow will be a very long day. And you? I'm meeting with Andre to review the legal strategy. I need to understand the precise weaknesses in their contestation. Pierce was impressed yet again. While he was lost and nervous, Ilara was working methodically to dismantle the problem. The true legal battle was about to begin, but the bigger personal victory had already been won in Chicago.
If you loved this tale of a multi-million-dollar inheritance, unexpected expertise, and a life-changing lesson in respect, you won't want to miss what we have lined up for tomorrow. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you can join us for another thrilling and emotional story. Thank you for watching until the very end. Hit that subscribe button and we'll see you tomorrow for more. See you in the next video.